Backbenchers oversee the interests of citizens, you and me. But how can they be agents of government accountability after them no hold a portfolio? And them and a minister? No. So then how can they facilitate government transparency? And the next thing, them and a front bencher. So how them affect me? You see, a lot of work is in committees. So these portfolio-free MPs with less dire responsibilities are more accessible to you and me. So they help with policy, but it helps if we engage them, you see. So they're not just in the back benches, but on the ground, in the trenches. Though in the back of Parliament, we're at the front of their cause. So pause. Find your backbencher at jampja.org.
Zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table by the side or the back. You fi check out the servings, just do the maths. Not taking too much, finger below the facts. Zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table by the side or the back. Take note of the sodium, the sugars and the fats by percent and less in on the right track. You fi zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table by the side or the back. Vitamins, minerals and vitamin 2, 20% and more that good for you. You fi zoom nutrition facts. You fi zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. You fi zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. Less sugar, less salt intake and less fat. You fi zoom in.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Jamaica Moves, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, the National Health Fund, and JCAP.
Every school is free of unhealthy, ultra-processed products. You know, those high in salt, fats, and sugar. If only that weren't a dream. The reality is that many children have an unhealthy diet at school, and 23% of them are overweight or obese. This can lead to hypertension, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. Let's protect our children's right to health with a policy for schools that prevents unhealthy food marketing and ensures access to nutritious foods. The time is now. Let's implement the National School Nutrition Policy. A message from the Heart Foundation of Jamaica and
Jamaica. Let's spread the word around to let the world know that we are proud to be one republic. We on the road to republic. Well then, let's propel we nation moving forward in a new direction. True independence, that's the projection. No more dependency, it's the best plan. Yes, we know what's best for us, cause we want we country prosperous. So make we just pull together as the general public while on the road to republic. Jamaica. Let's spread the word around to let the world know that we are proud to be one republic. We on the road to republic.
A message from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
We on the road to republic.
Go for dreams. See you on the top in this winter. Oh, white dream, passion melts the ice. We hold hands to celebrate. We share joy and pleasure. Streets of sweat glisten and freeze while we raise beautiful wishes are lit by spotlight. a winding nice trail. I define the new speed, I set a new record too. A new start for dreamers.
Icicle Buster.
Recently, we've noticed our average temperature is staying above zero. We'd like to remind you that when you go out, please continue keeping yourselves warm. By doing so, you would not catch a cold.
I think it's time to move the flowers out so they can see the sun. Meanwhile, the new flower still needs to be tested in the cold.
Technical team, our representatives from the entertainment, culture, and creative industries who are present. Welcome to our second meeting on the National Policy for Culture, Entertainment, and the Creative Economy. A very special welcome to our stakeholders from Jamaica's vibrant culture and creative sector, who are with us today to sensitize us to their role in the landscape of culture and the entertainment sector, as well as to provide us with their insights and alert us to any change that they would recommend. We gather today amid remarkable progress. Port Royal's recent UNESCO World Heritage designation, the launch of the Jamaica Entertainment and Cultural Insurance Plan for creatives, a scheduled institutional and legislative reform in the short term, and the rollout of key programs which embed resilience and sustainability. And of course, the archaeological ensemble of the 17th century Port Royal, that designation, as well as the revival pilgrimage to Wat Town by UNESCO. Your continued review and recommendations will shape a transformative framework that is true to Vision 2030. We work to preserve and celebrate our national identity, protect our inclusive and diverse society, harness and value our cultural and creative assets for economic growth and development, and secure resilience in the sector. So, members of the Joint Select Committee, stakeholders and technical team, I look forward to a productive dialogue today, and I look forward to the presentations that are being made. Presentations today will be made by the Jamaica Music Society, the Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And if time permits, we will take a presentation from the National Gallery of Jamaica. So we will now go to the minutes. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to look at the minutes. We may want to defer the minutes and take the minutes at the end of the committee meeting. So we would just go straight into presentations with the permission of the committee. Thank you. So I would invite at this time the Jamaica Music Society, Mr. Mullings, to make his presentation.
All right, thank you, Minister Grinch.
Let me just check, you have copies of Mr. Mullings' presentation? I'll give you a minute just to locate your copies. All right, so we're good now? All right, thank you. Mr. Mullings, please go ahead.
Okay, all right, so thank you. Thanks again, Minister Grinch, for this opportunity to participate in this round of sort of review of this green paper. So we've been invited to do an evaluation, we were invited to do an evaluation of the potential impact of this policy, which is the National Policy for Culture, Entertainment, and the Creative Economy on the operations of JAMS. And I've taken this sort of liberty to go beyond just an evaluation of its impact on JAMS alone, but also to take a broader look, Minister, if you will, on its impact on the wider collective management ecosystem. Because certainly whatever tends to affect JAMS almost invariably also affects JCAP and JAM copy, JCAP for the most part. So throughout my presentation, there will be elements of it which will be in reference to both organizations as we proceed. So by way of sort of introduction of JAMS for those committee members who may not be very familiar with us, we were established in 2006 and were operationalized in 2007. So this year, actually, we'll be celebrating 20 years since our establishment as a collective management organization. We're a not-for-profit entity governed by a board of directors, and we also fall under the auspices of the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, IFPI. Now, as a national copyright licensing body and also as a performance rights organization, JAMS and indeed JCAP operate at the core of Jamaica's intellectual property monetization architecture. Our effectiveness determines whether creative output to a large extent is converted into measurable economic return for Jamaican creators. Now, this policy, it signals for us a strategic shift towards formalization, governance strengthening, regulatory discipline, compliance enhancement, and intellectual property system development. These objectives are conceptually aligned with structured rights management systems. However, operational impact on CMOs will depend on whether governance reforms are translated into institutional clarity, legislative strengthening, and administrative integration. Without such translation, the policy's impact on rights administration bodies may remain indirect rather than structurally transformative. In terms of institutional significance of the collective management bodies, just to give a sense of scale and national coverage, JAMS represents the largest amalgamation of record producers and performers in Jamaica. In the case of record producers, for instance, it includes both individuals and established record labels. JCAP is the single largest grouping of songwriters and composers in Jamaica. When combined with JAMS's representation of nearly 3,000 record producers and performers, the two CMOs administer rights on behalf of over 85% of practitioners within the Jamaican music industry. This level of coverage establishes both organizations as core infrastructure institutions within Jamaica's creative economy. Their stability directly influences income distribution efficiency, international reciprocity, and export credibility. Now, in terms of economic contribution and revenue distribution, collectively, JAMS and JCAP have delivered over $1.6 billion in royalties to rights holders. Specifically, JAMS, for its part, has distributed, and by the end of this year would have distributed close to $750 million since our inception to producers and performers. These distributions represent direct household income, reinvestment capital for new creative works, entrepreneurial financing for talent development, pension-like income support for senior practitioners. Royalty systems therefore form a material pillar of Jamaica's creative sector income architecture. In terms of institutional evolution, JAMS has evolved beyond being just a licensing and performance rights organization. Over the past 7 years, for instance, we have facilitated access to affordable life insurance for practitioners, or members in particular, and over the past 3 years, enabled access to group health insurance coverage. These initiatives demonstrate that rights management bodies increasingly function as socio-economic stabilizers within the creative class. A national cultural and creative entertainment policy which delivers on its objectives of enabling industry institutions through legislative and policy support will enable CMOs to deepen their economic and social stabilization role due to stronger economic viability, therefore benefiting record producers, performers, songwriters, and composers across the ecosystem. Now, how does the policy align with the strategic, our mandate and objectives align with the policy's objectives and vice versa? The policy advances sector formalization, governance and accountability strengthening, regulatory coherence, compliance culture development, skills certification, export market expansion, intellectual property system enhancement. For professionally governed CMOs such as JAMS, these directions are aligned in principle. However, conceptual alignment alone does not guarantee institutional strengthening. Tangible benefits require integration of licensing, enforcement and compliance mechanisms into administrative systems and legislative design. Enforcement and risk revenue considerations. JAMS licenses the broadcast and public performances of sound recordings rights owners throughout Jamaica. Public performance licensing applies to all entities that play recorded music outside the domestic circle, including hotels, banks, retail outlets, supermarkets, nightclubs, broadcast media, and, very importantly, the events sector. Jamaica stages an estimated 16,000 plus events annually, based on Planning Institute of Jamaica's data, which are derived from parish councils. And this data is also corroborated by the Jamaica Constabulary Force's own data, which typically presents numbers which exceeds the 16,000. This volume represents substantial monetization potential. Where copyright licensing compliance is inconsistent or inequitable across parishes, as it is now, due to lack of compliance or enforcement support from other authorities and agencies, or copyright licensing is not embedded within permit requirement systems, the risk of revenue leakage increases materially. Even modest compliance gaps across this activity base results in cumulative losses affecting thousands of rights holders. The viability of JAMS is therefore dependent not only on statutory rights, but on supportive legislative and administrative ecosystems that enable consistent and equitable enforcement. The policy also touches on governance and compliance provisions, and in this regard, I'm going to take a look at the institutional impact. The policy contains strong references to governance strengthening, enterprise formalization, compliance culture, reporting standards, regulatory coordination, strengthening intellectual property systems. These commitments are directionally positive. However, the policy does not explicitly position CMOs as intellectual property infrastructure institutions. It does not explicitly integrate copyright licensing requirements into administrative systems. It does not explicitly mandate structured enforcement harmonization across ministries. And it does not explicitly embed rights verification mechanisms within regulatory approval processes. As a result, the practical impact of governance and compliance provisions on JAMS may be indirect rather than transformative. where general compliance improvements lead to stronger enforcement of copyright obligations by end users, JAMS would benefit through improved licensing adherence. However, without explicit policy measures addressing the institutional role and operational environment of CMOs, these governance reforms outlined in the policy may not materially strengthen the rights in administration architecture upon which creator income depends. Accordingly, from the perspective of JAMS, the policy's governance framework represents a positive but incomplete foundation. With targeted clarification and integration of rights management institutions into the governance architecture, the policy could more directly support the operational viability of CMOs and thereby advance its stated objective of strengthening Jamaica's intellectual property systems. Comparative and structural positioning. In established music exporting jurisdictions, policy frameworks typically, 1, clarify statutory licensing rules, integrate copyright licensing requirements into administrative processes, recognize CMOs as export-enabling institutions, and establish governance and transparency standards specific to rights administration. Domestically, governance and transparency standards specific to rights administration are currently being strengthened through the forthcoming Collective Management Organization regulations under the Copyright Act Amendment of 2015 via JIPO and the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. However, the policy itself does not yet embed CMOs structurally within its institutional design. This gap suggests that while intellectual property is acknowledged conceptually, rights administration institutions are not yet fully integrated into the policy's competitiveness framework. Socioeconomic and ecosystem impact. JCAP represents over 5,000 songwriters and composers, and this is subject to updated information from JCAP, which is, we're also here. When combined with JAMS's representation of nearly 3,000 record producers and performers, the two CMOs administer rights on behalf of over 85% of practitioners. Any systemic weakness in enforcement, compliance, or legislative clarity, therefore, has direct socioeconomic implications for thousands of Jamaican households. Royalty income supports the creative continuity, new talent development, entrepreneurial experimentation, and household economic stability. Strengthening rights administration should be viewed as income stabilization policy within the creative economy. Cross-ministry and legislative alignment. This one is very, very important. Achieving the policy's intellectual property strengthening objective requires coordination among the Ministry of Culture, Industry, Investment and Commerce, Ministry of National Security, and the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. Legislative strengthening, regulatory clarity, and enforcement harmonization are essential to ensuring consistent compliance nationally. Embedding copyright licensing requirements into permit requirement systems would materially enhance revenue capture efficiency and reduce inequitable enforcement disparities. I'm going to skip the section 9. It really speaks to, a suggestion from our end of an additional area that the policy could cover, which is recognizing, of course, the CMOs specifically and directly in the policy, and then go further in respect of section 9 by identifying KPIs, which over a 5-year period and over a 10-year period, the policy's objectives could then be evaluated against these specific KPIs. And I'll just mention 2 of them. So for instance, royalty growth and revenue capture. Across a 5-year benchmark, you could measure increase in royalty collections attributable to improved compliance. Over a 10-year period, you could then look at the sustained compound growth in annual royalty distributions and export inflows. Right? So there are others there which can be looked at later on. Now, in terms of conclusion, The National Policy for Culture, Entertainment, and the Creative Economy, 2035 represents a commendable and necessary strategic direction for strengthening Jamaica's creative industries and intellectual property framework. From the perspective of JAMS, and by extension JCAP, the policy's impact on collective management organization operations will ultimately depend on the clarity of the institutional positioning, the consistency of implementation design, and the timeliness of legislative and administrative follow-through. If governance reforms are translated into operational integration, including embedding copyright licensing requirements within administrative systems and formalizing cross-ministry enforcement coordination, the policy could materially enhance licensing efficiency, reduce revenue leakage, and strengthen income stability for thousands of record producers, performers, songwriters, composers. Absent such structured implementation, its impact on CMOs may remain incremental rather than transformative. And finally, given that JAMS and JCAP collectively represent over 85% of practitioners and have delivered more than $1.6 billion in royalties to Jamaican creators, the strengthening of collective rights administration is not a peripheral sectoral matter. It is foundational to the credibility, competitiveness, and economic sustainability of Jamaica's creative economy, and essential to realizing the policy's objectives of intellectual property system enhancement, export competitiveness, and sustainable creator economy. And when we say export competitiveness, not everyone immediately grasps the fact that we are actually entities that are responsible for a significant inflow of royalties. Therefore, we fall within the export sector because we're bringing in foreign exchange. Right? Section 11 really presents a set of recommendations, Minister, which we think would be very useful in helping to shape the policy into an even more robust document, and so that the ecosystem of CMOs could really benefit significantly from what the policy intends on doing. It's an aspirational document, the policy, and of course we would want to be very much in step with its objectives. And so it mentions institutional recognition of the CMOs in the document. That's what we're recommending. Speak about administrative integration, structured enforcement harmonization, legislative alignment and strengthening, and then monitoring and measurable impact. Minister, that is, for now, the input from JAMS. I'll be able to make further inputs as the proceedings go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you turn your mic off, please, Evan? All right. That was an excellent presentation, very informative, to the point, and well structured. And the strengthening of collective rights administration is important to government. We recognize the importance, and your presentation today reinforces and underscores how why we have taken the Green Paper to Parliament, why we are having these consultations and these presentations, so that the gaps can be highlighted, and that as members of the Joint Select Committee, we can take into consideration what you have put forward and to see how we will further improve this Green Paper, which will become a White Paper and policy. So we thank you so much, and now I will invite members of the committee to ask questions. I invite Member Hamilton to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions. you mentioned 16,000 plus events annually, and you mentioned revenue leakage from inconsistent compliance and the absence of embedded admin systems. What categories, and I'm talking about like broadcast, events, retail, film, advertising, represent the largest leakage based on your operational experience? And how would you propose the embedding of licensing into parish permit systems? Why I'm asking, currently, I don't know if you have an online portal now where people can apply, because you don't know. Okay. I'm sure that will help, because in my past life, we usually have to come down to the office and apply. But in light of the leakage also, would you support, this is mainly for JCAP with the mechanical licensing, would you support minimum statutory rates for mechanical royalties that are a feature of other jurisdictions? We don't have that here, but I know, for example, in the United States and Canada, they have minimum rates, which help in, whatever agreements creatives have with counterparts. And also on the international reciprocity section, what are the barriers to increasing inbound royalties to Jamaica, and what policy inclusion could best improve Jamaica's export credibility?
Okay, thank you, Member Hamilton. And I hope I'm addressing you correctly. All right, so in terms of leakage, I would venture to say that what we call public performance is where we have the most significant area of leakage. And public performance really broadly encompasses the non-media side of things. So we're talking about the hotels, the shops, the bars, the restaurants, banks, and so forth. But the most significant component of public performance where there is a significant leakage happens to be on the event side. So of the 16,000 at a minimum to we've seen as high as 24,000 events annually, it has gone as high as that in the past. We are currently only monetizing or licensing around a little above a third of that. And that has to do significantly with what is mentioned several times in my presentation, the inconsistent sort of requirement at the various parishes by different authorities that are required to support the process. So for instance, on the police side, that is where you ultimately have to go and you ultimately get that final approval for your event. In quite a number of parishes, that works smoothly, it works beautifully, is well supported. But in a number of parishes, it doesn't. There's this inconsistency in terms of how the police, and mind you, they have been extremely good in terms of supporting the process. But it was referring to now just the inconsistency across parishes and how each parish really handles its involvement in the compliance system. That is something that if we can get that streamlined and equitable and consistent, then we could see that leakage, fall considerably, in a very short period of time. However, the gap really stems from the fact that the police their hands are tied. The police currently are unable to direct event organizers to have the jams and the JCAP permits. They cannot bound them, they cannot compel them, they cannot force event promoters to have these permits as a condition precedent the police giving their own approval, because there's a gap in the Copyright Act. So whereas for the parish council, there's a 10-day time period that you have to apply by, for instance, there's no specific timeline indicated in the Copyright Act or any related act which speaks to a timeline within which event organizers must have these copyright permits. There's none. So the police cannot, compel someone to have that in advance of the staging of the event or the start of the event. However, the inconsistency lies in the fact that by the time that event promoter or the dance starts, once you're now in the realm of the event happening, you're now in the realm of copyright infringement, and the police has vast powers to shut down the event because there's no permit. So, on the one hand, they can act at a particular point in time, but that point in time at which they can act is sort of inconvenient. And we would not want to be putting the police in harm's way, to go shutting down events because there are no permits. But we would rather, from a governance standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, we would rather that it takes place at an earlier stage in the process. And so what we've advocated and lobbied for is for that inclusion of a 10-day timeline in the Copyright Act, and to our understanding, that has now been accepted and is being advanced through the various stages of the process, and hopefully will come to Parliament at some point and is also passed. That would give the police what the police has been asking us for, the power to be able to act in a meaningful way to stem the leakage that we're talking about and to curb infringement. And to your second question about inbound royalties, there's a gap here as well which affects the volume and the frequency of inbound royalties to us. The current gap in the copyright law relates to an absence of rights for performers. So whereas producers, songwriters, and composers are able to earn royalties in Jamaica when the songs are played on radio, TV, in the bars, and so forth, and at events, the performers, meaning the vocalists and the musicians, they're unable to earn similarly. They're unable to earn in an equivalent way to their counterparts in Barbados, in Trinidad, in the UK. So when a Tony Rebel song, for instance, gets played on BBC One Extra in the UK, and that same song is played in Jamaica, Tony Rebel is able to earn as a performer along with the musicians from the UK territory, but he cannot earn it in Jamaica. Now, as a result of that gap in the Act, we, as a CMO, are unable to enter into reciprocal arrangements with, for instance, our US counterpart, Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange currently holds millions of US dollars for Jamaican performers, but they have refused on multiple occasions to engage with us because their principle is simple. If you are not able to collect for us in your market, we're not going to turn over a dime to you from our territory. So what happens, those royalties will sit until the statute of limitation runs out and it gets distributed across other persons. So we have been losing millions of US dollars as a result of that gap in the Copyright Act regarding performers' rights.
Thank you, Mr. Mullings. I wish to now recognize Senator Cooper.
Thank you so much, Chair. I noted from your presentation strong emphasis on the issues of compliance and enforcement. And I know those are issues that are just painful across the board, almost every sector that we look at in Jamaica. One thing that sometimes concerns me, though, and it's not a concern based on issues of entitlement, is the ask for enforcement of private rights in certain circumstances, and that can become a bit problematic. So I'm wondering if this is something that you have given thought to, and if you have any recommendations how to address that particular issue.
Sure, thanks for that question, Senator. Absolutely. Yes, these are private rights that we administer, and I'm happy that you recognize that because not everyone does. So they are in fact private rights. Now, our basis, our rationale for seeking this kind of support to strengthen the IP system comes from maybe 2 or 3 places. Number one, we are, under the Copyright Act of Jamaica, we are the only only one CMO is allowed to represent the rights of a particular group of rights owners at any point in time. And because of that, we have this awesome responsibility to ensure that that happens. Now, how are we going to ensure that that happens if the legislative framework is not strong enough to give us the effectiveness that we need? That, for me, is a significant area that I think should be considered when, the committee looks at, whether or not to give that kind of support for private rights administration. But also, in terms of us being almost I don't want to use the word monopoly, but in a sense we are. Given the significant contribution that we make to the creative economy, we're almost performing a public function in a sense, a public good in a sense. And for that reason, and the impact that we have on thousands and thousands of creators, households who rely on this, elder musicians who rely on this as a form of pension, it's very important that I think, from a state level, the institutions are supported and strengthened to allow that ecosystem and the creators to really benefit from what we've been asked to perform on their behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Mullings. I think we, the members here, have been well informed on issues impacting on the industry in relation to copyright. Questions asked by Member Hamilton and Senator Cooper has really given you an opportunity to detail what are the gaps. And I'm hoping as we continue this consultation that recommendations will come as to how we can strengthen the copyright system so that the members of the sector can truly benefit. A public education program is also very, very, very necessary because a lot of people, the little man in the community or woman who is putting on their own robbing don't understand. That's where some of the leakage takes place because they don't understand that they need to pay royalties, they need to pay a fee for a permit, and they just wonder why JAMS and JCAP want money. So this is going to be an uphill task, but the fact is that we have started this journey today, and it's going to be of tremendous benefit to the country. I want to acknowledge Senator Bernard, who came in when we started, and I'm just checking. And I want to say to our members who are online, feel free to ask questions because you may wish to have clarification on matters. So at this time now, I think Member Williams, Delroy Williams wanted to ask a question, after which I'll take Senator Bernard. All right? So Senator, if you could turn your mic off, please. Thank you. I'm sorry. I will. Okay, well, Senator, Member Williams' mic is red, so we'll take it.
So
and then, yes.
I mean, some of what was said in response to Member Hamilton would have covered some things I wanted to ask, but I still want to place some emphasis on it, and if you can add a little more details, then I would suggest you do, just for me to understand exactly where you are. And notice in your presentation, you mentioned 3 times, well, I've seen 3 times, the cross-ministry and legislative alignment in different ways. And it's mentioned in the conclusion, it's mentioned here as under the heading cross-ministry, and then it's mentioned here at the end that structured enforcement, harmonization, legislative alignment, monitoring and measurable impact, which means it's critical, it's important to you. So I really want to know, what's the thinking? you have any ideas? So, because in one sense, you're really referring to the permit requirement process, and figuring that if that process is structured in a particular way, then it would stop the leakage, the revenue leakage, or I go far away in doing that. So I really like you to go into a little more, what's the thinking from your standpoint? And then two, I'm not sure if I got you right when you mentioned the 16,000 and you said 1/3. It's 1/3, or the 16,000 represents 1/3. Are you saying yes, but what you're collecting 1/3? You mentioned 1/3 somewhere. I'm not clear what you were saying at the time.
All right, so let me start there. So the data indicates that there are approximately, at a minimum, 16,000 events held each year. My 1/3 reference has to do with how many of those got a JAMS permit. Okay. How many of those complied with our permit requirement.
So you were saying that you're basically, so it's 1/3 of the 16,000. And then, potentially, and this is something I want you as a committee to consider also. Then there are, so there's another potentially revenue loss, for want of a better way to coin it, in the sense that there are events that receive no permit that take place, and because there is an unwillingness on the part of government, municipalities, call them what, there's an unwillingness to issue permits, and that also affects the revenue, right? So that, on both sides.
Yes. So as a matter of fact, so Williams, MP Williams, the leakage is much more significant, and it expands beyond events. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, and my reference and sort of multiple references to the interministerial sort of collaboration that's required is because of the fact that it has to go beyond just event compliance. So we're looking now at, for instance, nightclubs, for instance, or clubs, lounges. They have to get their particular approval from the parish council, for instance. What we would love to see is that before they're granted that final approval by the council, there's a check-off list which says, because clubs rely primarily heavily on the use of music. And so there should be something that says, do you have these copyright permits? Because this is something which is foundational to your operation. We're talking about bars and restaurants as well. They also have to get various permits and licenses and approvals. So what we're trying and aiming for is collaboration between the various ministries. So even if an act does not currently specify that requirement, some sort of cross-ministerial protocol is developed. Our policy position is developed that supports or requires now, at least on an interim basis, that, say, Companies Office of Jamaica, that when you go to register, as a club or a bar or whatever it is, that at that point it can be identified, that or directed that you need to also go to these other institutions. And now when you're setting up a business, you're told you need to go get your NHT and NIS, registration sorted out. So what I'm referring to is a system which, a policy position which now speaks more strongly to that sort of coordination, so that the leakage that we're talking about, the support of the IP system becomes much more strong, stronger, or much more strong, beyond just events. It goes well beyond events.
Thank you very much for that.
If I could just add that the Ministry of Culture is looking at a one-stop permit structure, and also to developing the protocol that is being suggested here. It's not going to threaten the revenue that the municipalities will get, because I know they get nervous when we say that. But what it will do is put structure into the industry, so that there's more efficiency. The CMOs will be part of that structure, the police, the municipalities, and it will be a more efficient way to sign off on permits in a timely manner. I will be having discussions with the Minister of State and the Ministry of Local Government as a start. As a start.
As a start.
Right. We're going to have those discussions. But there are some gaps, and we have to streamline the sector in order to make it function more efficiently. The Minister of State and the Ministry of Local Government has been mandated by his minister to speak to this minister, and those discussions will begin. But I just want to say to the stakeholders here that the members of this Joint Select Committee will be critical to what comes out of these consultations. But it augurs well for us. I just want to say to the stakeholders, we have started this journey, and it's going to be to your benefit. So I also want to just make a quick reference to the fact that the ministry, we have data because we work closely with the police, and we get the data for each parish in terms of permits that are issued. And we're pulling all of that data together to make a presentation from the entertainment branch of the ministry to this committee so there can be an understanding what the structure is across the parishes and what is happening on the ground. The other thing too, the ministries, the sector is fragmented across ministries. And we do have an entity coming out of a recommendation from the PIOJ that would bring all the ministries together under a council. And that we are reactivating so that everybody will be at the table together. But we will discuss that further. Senator Gale, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Let me congratulate you for the work that you have been doing. And, you know, some things just jumped out at me. The life insurance for practitioners, the pension, and the health coverage, and I hope one day we can get to a stage where the access to health coverage will be extended for those who no longer have the agility and the ability to perform. But, you know, when it's needed most. I'm happy you brought up the question of the integration between ministries, because that's important. That is something that we normally overlook, but using a term that you are accustomed to, we can be performing as a choir and we're off key, where the ministries are off key and they're not in alignment. But I want to look into a particular area that you raised. You may have glossed over it in your presentation, and that's the monitoring framework. And you would have been modest in my mind when indicating the benchmark 5 to 10 years. But your members would be watching and would have created an appetite and expectation. And maybe you can tell us in the first instance what would be immediate priority, and when I say immediate, 12 to 24 months for this committee to appreciate. The other thing I want to understand in a little more expansive way, your first recommendation under 11, the institutional recognition. Expand on it a little and, you know, tell us what this means, whether local recognition or also international recognition. But what will it do for you as a CMO? And the last thing I want to ask, maybe at this time, you know, JAMS cannot work alone, and we don't suspect you to work alone. And when you made reference to the owing of royalties, especially on an international basis, your alliance with the International Federation of Phonographic Industry, in my mind, that's your global union. Yeah? And to what extent you would have utilized the support in advocacy from this institution, and has it paid off, especially against bringing into sharp focus the need to pay for royalties owned especially by international firms or institutions? Yeah, thank you, Chair.
All right, so thank you, Senator Gill. Three very significant questions, if I was counting and making my notes correctly. I'll start with the last one first, which is IFPI. We call it IFPI, International Federation of the Phonographic Industry. They are, in a sense, our international governing body of sorts. And they were, as a matter of fact, instrumental in the establishment of JAMS. So they collaborated with local industry interests in ensuring that JAMS was established. So that is your first marker, that they have a direct interest in seeing to it that whatever the jurisdiction we're talking about, they have a direct interest in seeing that there's a framework, there's a system that ensures rights are being administered and royalties are being remitted in and out. Because, to their credits, IFPI, for instance, would have ensured that JAMS was able to act not just on behalf of local rights owners in the Jamaican context, but through IFPI, we were also able to get what we call the international catalog from the majors, the Sonys, the Universal, the Warners, through the IFPI. And so when we speak now from a position of authority in terms of representing in a practical way the global catalog of sound recordings, largely because of IFPI. Now, when you look now across, say, the US and wonder aloud whether or not IFPI might not be able to provide a similar kind of support, they have attempted to, and that has not worked the way we would have wanted it to work, because IFPI, for its part, does not have leverage, the kind of leverage that is required in relation to our US counterpart. Our US counterpart was established by the US government. And so they abide by, they meaning our US counterpart, they abide by very stringent rules, very stringent laws in statute in terms of whether or not they can participate on a reciprocal basis. So it's not just the general manager, the executive director saying we don't want to have an arrangement with JAMS. It's their statute which limits them from being able to do that. All right? So that's that one. In terms of institutional recognition, what we're really getting at with this recommendation, and the basis for it is that we've looked at other jurisdictions. We've looked at, for comparison, we've looked at Ireland, Barbados, Trinidad, in reference to this particular point. And at least in 2 of the 3 instances, in their policy drafts and other documents, cultural policy drafts and other national framework documents, they do refer to the CMOs by names in these policy documents, sort of recognizing the strength and the importance of these institutions to their IP framework. So it's not just a passing reference to CMOs, but identifying them by name, given the stature that they have and the importance, the role that they play in a framework that supports a national objective. Because Jamaica would have signed on to various treaties and conventions internationally at the WIPO level. And JAMS and JCAP and JAMCOPI, we are very instrumental in basically ensuring that those obligations that we've signed on to, some of those obligations, that those obligations are met through the actions of the CMOs. So when we're talking about broadcast compliance, radio, TV, and cable, and so forth, our role, there was a time when Jamaica was on the US watch list for IFPI. Not sure how many persons remember this. You will remember. Because, especially since 2007, JCAP would have preceded us. But over time, because of the role that we've played in bringing broadcasters into compliance, a significant IP area for the US, Jamaica, for its part, has been able to come off that watch list. And so we bring a sort of credibility internationally to Jamaica's IP framework. And so I think it's very important that the CMOs are, for that purpose, recognized by name within documents like these. So that's the basis really for that. And finally, in terms of immediate priorities or priority, I could throw 3 or 4 at you. But let's just go with, the coordination around compliance and enforcement. We believe that that would be the #1 priority for us right now, because that would close out a whole range of gaps in the system. That would close the gap. That would mean ultimately in any given year, those 16,000 at a minimum, we would no longer be at 1/3 of that, but possibly at near 100%. It would mean in terms of the bars, the restaurants, the hotels, and so forth, we're closer to 100%. And therefore, the royalty payout, it multiplies. It has impact. And so the producers that you meet on the street and the artists that you meet on the street who say they've never gotten or they don't get enough, we now would be in a position to change that picture. Because it's not that they don't earn, many of them don't earn enough. And that's because we're not able to collect enough to make it significant and very material for the vast majority. Many do earn and earn well, I must tell you. But there is still a significant mass of our membership which is at the lower tier, which could earn better. And we could learn something from Ireland. Ireland recently introduced a minimum wage of sorts, threshold, for its music creators, almost like a monthly stipend, but it's more than a stipend, So the idea is, especially for the older creators, to be able to assist through royalty payouts to them, earn the royalties for them to be earning more meaningfully from their works. Excuse me? Yes.
Could you use the mic, please, Member Hamilton? Because they're taking notes, and so you need to use it.
No, I was really, yes, it's sort of Chair.
Yes.
I was just saying the non-terrestrial should also be a priority because there is money out there that you can collect immediately if certain things are done. So I think that should also be a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. Performance rights, I said I could do 2 or 3. Performance rights, and that provision, just to be transparent and for full disclosure, performance rights, it is currently going through several stages of the process to be put into a bill to be brought before the Parliament. It is fairly advanced from my last update. And so that, when it is passed, should close out that gap significantly. Performers' rights. Performers. So the producers are covered, songwriters, composers are covered, but we're talking performers, artists and musicians. Right.
And performance also in terms of play, not just going on stage and perform, but yes. But there are a lot of royalties out there, uncollected royalties. I am in discussions with some of the major record companies. They have uncollected royalties. They can't find some of the writers or the performers. And I'm in discussion with them. They're to send me a list. When I tell you millions of dollars, and some of those writers, songwriters, and artists, they're suffering. But funds are out there for them. we have a job to do, and we are, we are committed to ensuring that it's done. Go ahead.
It would be good for the purposes of this committee to understand what is this approximate amount of uncollected royalty, as opposed to, again, those that are outstanding, that needs to be paid, and because there's a difference between uncollected and outstanding, of course. And then now, the time frame that we're dealing with, it would be good for us to gather that kind of data, because it is data like that that would be instrumental in, us focusing on what we need to capture in terms of not only policy, but a legislative framework.
Well, we certainly could go on and on discussing this aspect of it, but I want to thank members for asking the relevant questions and getting the answers from Mr. Mullings. And I think we can now move on to JCAP. There will be some overlap in terms of the presentation, but I think it's important that for members who do not know what's the difference, when you speak in terms of performance royalties as opposed to other royalties that are uncollected or that songwriters and performers earn. So in your presentation, if you could find a way to sort of explain the difference. Okay, and I'm going to declare interest. I'm a founding member of JCAP. Thank you. So, please go ahead. Now.
Afternoon. You heard me? Okay, great. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Mullins, because we can concur that what he has just stated and presented is exactly what JCAP is definitely going through. And the only difference I can see is in the representation. So this is where the difference is with JAMS and JCAP. So JCAP represents the persons who actually create the work, and the work is the music. So the persons who write the lyrics, the persons who play the instruments, who build the rhythm, and publishers. So those are the persons that JCAP represent, while JAMS represent the executive producers, the performers, and producers. I'm correct, Evan? Great. So that's the difference between JCAP and JAMS. Now, just to give a little background on what JCAP is. So Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors, and Publishers is from No, the members are the songwriters, the publishers, and the music, those who actually own the copyright in a song. We aim to deal with our members fairly, honestly, reasonably, courteously, and timely in accordance with our membership agreement, and each member has to sign that agreement. We strive to be transparent, be clearly in explaining to our members what their rights are and the rights we administer on their behalf by providing information to members about the business of the society. Now, JCAP was established in March of 1998, and we commenced operation in 1999 of January as a national non-profit organization to take over the agency operation of the Performing Rights Society. Now, these were the persons who were in Jamaica from the UK. So our local and national creators decided that, look, we can do it ourselves, so we will now take the lead from those that were here from the UK. So that is how JCAP came about. Now, JCAP as a member of the International Confederation of Authors and Composers. Now, this international organization is a governing body that monitors, in a sense, all CMOs across the world. Now, we're a part of that association, and they have over 200 music copyright society within that entity. And we are signed with over 75 reciprocals, and that reciprocal is what we use to ensure we have a large amount of repertoire that we can represent for creators all across the world. Now, under that umbrella, we have over 3 million songwriters that we represent, both local and internationally. Now, regionally...
And you may want to indicate that songwriters who are registered with JCAP, they are represented across the world.
Across the world.
Yeah.
And this is to the reciprocal that we sign with some of these countries. Regionally, JCAP is a founding member of the Association of Caribbean Copyright Societies, a collective that promotes and cooperates among Caribbean CMOs and enhances the region's digital licensing and information technology capacity. Through joint advocacy and coordinated negotiations, the ACCS elevates the bargaining power and visibility of Caribbean music rights on a global stage. Now, the Copyright Act of Jamaica 1999 and amended in 2015 and 2023 sets out the principles governing copyright administration in Jamaica. These principles assure authors and owners of copyright works, namely original musical, literary, dramatic, and artistic works, certain exclusive rights over the use of their work. Now, JCAP has a membership in 2015, 3,472 members, and presently we have 4,050 members. Now, we normally talk in pre-COVID and post-COVID figures. So I want to highlight that since 2020 to 2024, JCAP has collected over $990 million in income for both local and international royalties, and we have distributed over $577 million of royalties to our members. I'm sorry, 577 million. Yeah, I said it correctly. Now, some of our most recent successes is that we have now recently entered the Cayman Islands. So what had happened is that PRS, who is Performing Rights Society and who were the original administrator within the Caribbean before nationals of each country decided to take the administration of copyright work for themselves in their own country. They were in the Cayman Islands, and they have asked us now to take over. But in actuality, Cayman did not really have an entity that was really there working for them. So we are now tasked, and we have taken up that mantle to go into Cayman and start the process there. So we have successfully started an agreement with Radio Cayman, which is a broadcaster in that country. So we will definitely for this year start to go into Cayman and educate the people of Cayman. We are going to have meetings with the government, the IP offices there, so that we can assess and we can also help the creatives in Cayman in setting up and running the copyright society for them in that territory. So that is something that we have recently done. Recently also, we have signed digital licensing, but what we have found is that a lot of persons think that because we are online, say we have YouTube, right? Persons think once they put their music on YouTube and they get a 1 play or 100 streams, etc., they automatically earn, but this is not so. YouTube in the past have refused to sign agreements with regional bodies because what they have been saying is that the region, we need to tighten up or tidy up our agreements, and that agreement mainly is how persons really work together, because you find a lot of persons are working in the space and everything is on a how would you say it now? Everybody is just doing it informal, right? Everybody is in a space, they're creating music, and nobody thinks to draft an agreement, nobody thinks to write something on paper and say, let us sign and let us agree right now. They don't do this. And because of this, the YouTube and the Spotify, they are not really eager to work with us in the region because they don't want to say, okay, now let's start, and then maybe 2 years down the line, there are a lot of conflicts. So they really stay away from the region in terms of trying to ensure that whatever is played on their platform, the creators earn. That was not happening. What normally happens when you put something on YouTube, for example, you get paid through advertisement. If your channel is not monetized, you don't normally, or you might not earn from that monetization. So persons in actuality do not understand that this is what is happening. But for JCAP now, we have finally signed an agreement with YouTube, and we will be distributing whatever collections we are able to get through YouTube and other social media platforms like Spotify going forward. And that we think is an excellent, it's an excellent thing to come for our creatives in Jamaica. We have signed 75 reciprocal agreements, and I can remember we have gotten recently from, is it North Korea or South Korea? South? The good Korea, that one. And when we got it, we were like, oh my God, can you believe that Jamaican music is actually being performed in those countries? You would not think that we actually have our renowned Jamaican music being played in those countries. But that is how good it is that we are representing and ensuring that our members have worldwide coverage. We have now been using for quite some time, and JAMS is using this as well, BMAT, which is a system which helps us to monitor the performances that are happening, especially on the radio stations. So it will be easier for us now to know exactly what is playing, when it is playing, and how often it plays, so that we can accurately pay out to our members. So we have also pulled together resources in order to have the ability to license larger repertoires. And we now have global network of affiliates through linkages. So these are some of the successes that we have had recently. Now we expect the Green Paper of National Policy for Culture, Entertainment and the Creative Economy 2025 to 2035 will impact us in a favorable way as we continue to expand and globalize our operations, as well as overcoming the challenges that we will state. Now, JCAP continues to face deteriorating macroeconomic climate in Jamaica that has become susceptible to unfavorable economic changes on an international market. We, however, want to continue to lobby and enforce through the courts to manage the rights of both our local and international members while adhering to tight fiscal policies to ensure maximum payout for members. Lack of enforcement continues to be a major challenge for us, especially among media houses and cable operators. We have received favorable judgments, though, through the courts against several cable companies. However, damages and costs have not yet been determined due to delays in the court system. That's a challenge for us. The lack of regulation requiring a specific time period for a license, as Evan had mentioned before, that is a challenge for us. We want to obtain that time frame so that the promoters know that, okay, you need to have your license or your permit at a specific time in order for your event to continue. Right. Some solutions were being discussed so far is for lobbying of a private copy levy as a new stream of income for creators, as well as to assist in the setting up of cultural fund to fund scholarship for members and access to trade fairs, especially to build capacity. We want to promote and use IP as tools for economic development. And we want to continue lobbying government to foster cultural exchange by having musical trade fairs regionally, not just the players going overseas or international. We want to keep it in the region. And we want to strengthen partnership with other agencies the ministries, JIPO, and other society. And also there's something that's important that we wanted to state. We want to ensure the quota content is looked at in Jamaica. And when I say quota content, we're talking about where we have broadcasters. I'm not sure what possibly it is, but this is something that we would want, where we have broadcasters are mandated to use a certain percentage of local music on their broadcasting station, because from time to time, when we get the data, we realize that we have, for example, this is not the exact, for example, we may have more than 70% of international music usage being performed on our broadcasting station, 75% of international music and only 25% of local music being played in Jamaica, which is something that we want to reduce greatly, because the more international music is played in Jamaica, the more royalties we collect and send outside of Jamaica. So we want to keep the money we collect in Jamaica. JCAP is again lobbying the government for changes to the Copyright Act to include provisions for management of non-exclusive reciprocal agreements, which currently prohibits us to file claims against infringers for use of works represented under non-exclusive contracts. We want to thank the Ministry of Culture, Gender and Entertainment and Sports for giving us a voice in this green paper. We hope the implementation of same will be in short order, and we wish the team all the success in carrying out the activities over the period. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good presentation. I'm going to take questions now, but I'd like to ask one question. For example, based on what you collect, how much is paid out for the use of foreign music? I know in Canada they have a quota system where 30% of what is played on air has to be Canadian content. We don't have that in Jamaica. And so from the funds you collect for royalties, how much do you pay out? Give me some numbers. Give us some numbers.
I will have the numbers for you, but honestly, I don't have it in front of me, but I can safely say that we pay out from what we collect, approximately 65% more goes out outside of Jamaica, and the rest stays in Jamaica, which is, it's not good. It is not good at all.
That's something we should note. And the quota system is something that we may want to look at.
Yeah, it's me.
All right, I'll take Senator Gale, and then I'll take Senate.
So on the point of collection and distribution performance, and you know, some of your members might be talking to us. And based on your presentation, 990 million collected, and you spoke about the 577 distributed. And this would have been over a period between 2020 and 2024. But what is the gap in this collection and distribution payout? And could you tell us about the timeline for the payout to your members? That's the first question. The second question is around, 4,000 members. And I applaud you for the growth in membership, because that's always key. But to what extent do you have any kind of program that sensitizes and create the level of awareness for your members, for them to understand their rights? And, about capacity building and awareness. Digital and technology now. You spoke about the YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok. And everybody there on TikTok except me. But has there been the opportunity to measure revenues generated on these platforms now, or is it too early to kind of understand that. And my last question would be around, you know, we are trying to expand on a policy, and a policy is far-reaching. Not only those who we are trying to get to accord themselves in terms of a particular kind of behavior, but for JCAP, maybe you can tell us what are those performance indicators that your members can use to measure your own performance, to guide us, to inform this policy. Because this policy is about for everybody, including those who represent. And maybe you can tell us what kind of performance indicators you would want us to use to measure you as part of this policy.
Okay, so let me hold on to that last one.
I'm sure you would want.
That one will go last. Okay, so for the, let's discuss the digital revenue that you had asked about. So in this point in time, we unfortunately is unable to measure what the revenue from digital would look like right now. As stated, it's new to us, but what I can say is that from what we have seen so far, and this is something that we want to advise members, creators, etc., so that they understand how important it is, what we have seen so far. So for example, when we are in the system and looking at the exact works that are being paid out by these online social media platform, YouTube, Spotify, etc. When we go to these work, we realize that you have several other entities that are claiming local members' works. They are claiming Jamaican artists' works. Now, what we have to do now, we have to literally go on these works and say, or we have to contact the persons who are on it to say, no, this is a Jamaican person's work. This is a JCAP member work. Please remove yourself from this work. So what has been happening is that when persons go into those registration, because it is not being claimed, they go on it themselves and claim it for themselves. And this is what YouTube was not allowing us to do until we have now signed. So we can literally go in and see who is on it and let them know that no, we claim it. So at this point, we're unable to track and tell you what revenue would be out there, because as we speak, we're going through the list right now, and it's mountainous, it's many. So by the end of this year, we will be able to quantify, or we will be able to tell you what we have extracted from that revenue pool. So we'll not be able to tell you right now what is expected until we go through that first list that we have, and that's just one list of many. So for our members now, what programs we have several programs for our members to educate them to know, okay, these are the rights you have, this is what you can do as members of JCAP, this is what you can do as a member of a CMO. So from time to time, and when I say time to time, every quarter we have members forums. So our members come and we explain to them what is happening in the industry. Right now, AI is something that is all over the place. So we've been having seminars where we're telling persons what to expect, what they can do, who they can call. So we have been drastically educating our members. We have been giving them the information so they know what to expect in these globalization, in this time, in this change of times, what is happening for them. So we have programs in that manner. As it relates to our distribution and that gap where we advise what we have collected versus what we have distributed. Now, the gap is this. We have to factor in operational cost. That's one thing. And we have what is called cultural and social programs. So what happens is we can, based on the framework of the body that we're a part of, CSAC, which is the Confederation. Let me tell you exactly what it is. International Confederation of Authors and Composers. They have mandated that we can, or we're supposed to, based on our collection, have social and cultural programs. So from that, it's a specific amount or percentage that we can take to ensure that we use revenues to assist in whatever cultural programs we can set up for our members. So that is a part of what we have collected. So that is factored in that. So the operational costs and the social and cultural fund, that is what we do with that money. And there are also, how do I say this? We have works in our system that is unidentified. So once the money is there, we cannot touch that money. It is there until the creator comes and identifies it. So for example, we may have, say, the Honorable Grange, even though you're a member, write 50 songs, but has not registered those 50 songs. So those 50 songs will be playing and playing and playing. But until she comes and identifies those songs, the money will stay and we cannot touch it.
So you have that enough fund growing interest?
If I, just for clarification, after a period of time, however, the funds that are there is shared up between members of the society. It doesn't stay there in perpetuity.
There's a time period. So 3 years is the time period in which we can hold that money for. 3 years. Right? So until you identify it, it is there for 3 years. And then it goes to the members.
You may also want to explain how the royalty is broken down between writers and publishers, composers. How is it broken?
Okay, so just an example. So you have a song, and you have persons within that song. So you have the writers, the composers. A song is made up of the lyrics and the composition. No, it's 50-50, right? So if you have 10 persons who write the lyric of that song, that 10 is split up in the 50-50. I'm sorry, that 10 is split up 50. Right. If you have 3 persons who are the composition, somebody that plays the drum, somebody that plays the guitar, somebody that plays the keyboard, that 50 is split 3 ways. Right? If a member within that group is assigned to a publisher, then that publisher amount is split for that specific member. So I may be a part of that song, but I don't have a publisher. And Miss Grange may have a publisher. So Miss Grange's percentage, say 10%, her percentage is split with her publisher. And I may have 10% and no publisher, I retain my percentage. So that is how the split is done within a song. So if that song is performed, say for example, in Jamaica over a year 5 times, then depending on the amount we collect, right? That is how it is split. But you have to remember, music is played every day, and you might have millions of songs played on one particular station, and that station may pay $10,000 for that year. Now you have to remember that millions of songs is split amongst every individual within that song, and then it is split against that $10,000. So you might think, or persons seem to think that once my song is being performed, my boss, millions of money may I get. It doesn't work that way, because that $10,000 may split 10 million way, and you might earn 1 cent from that $10,000, right? So it is not a get-rich-quick solution, but it's a solution where persons who have written their work, right, and depend on it, right? So we encourage persons, whenever you write your song, ensure you register it, because you don't know. That money could be adding up, and that can form part of your pension, right? Because if you go and perform on a stage, you perhaps collect that performance money from the promoter. But remember, a song is not just written by the performer. You have individual who write in that song. So the performer collects his, whoever write the song, say it might be 3 other persons that write the song, but they don't perform. So how do they collect? They might be at home sitting on the sofa watching you perform on the stage. How do they benefit? So this is how writers, this is how composers who may not be the performers earn. And this is why we encourage all members, whether or not you're a JCAP member, once you create, join a CMO so that you can collect your royalties whenever the music is being played in public. So this is how it generally works.
All right. Member
Chair,
Donovan Williams. And
just
then
before
afterwards,
Donovan's
I'll
goes ahead. No, I just wanted a follow-up.
All right, go
based
ahead,
on
if
something
you could, yes.
Ms. Hewitt said earlier with the digital performance royalties. You mentioned the contract with YouTube and Spotify.
Yeah.
And that you're going through mountainous information now. These contracts, or is it one contract or more than one signed with each platform?
It's more than one with each.
I want to know if the contracts are retroactive.
Well, it is, because there is no doubt our music has been, Jamaica is the capital of the world when it comes to music, right? Everybody, everywhere you go, know Jamaican music. So it's retroactive. So we have to be going back.
So
it's
those persons who
mountainous.
were claiming royalties on behalf of Jamaicans that were not the owners, what would happen in that instance?
Well, going forward, they would have to remove their claim. And we signal YouTube, etc., that these persons were not, because they can't dispute it. Because what happened is we have the agreements with members, and we can produce that agreement to YouTube to let them know that these are the original persons, right? And they have something, I can't speak to what exactly it is, that they can go back
and recover.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Member Donovan Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask the JCAP representative, Miss, her name is Miss
Hewitt.
Miss Hewitt. What percentage of your, if you can estimate it, what percentage of your collections are from your counterpart or international association, CSAC? I'm trying to get at your collections internationally as against locally. What's the ratio like?
Okay, so CSAC is the governing body. So we don't collect from CSAC. They just represent the collectives. They represent CMOs worldwide.
So who do you collect from? Who is your...
We collect from...
You are the collector in Jamaica for international, because you distribute royalties overseas. And you just said that, you wish we would play more local music so that...
Yeah,
75% of the music is international. So you do pay royalties overseas.
We do.
So I'm saying, if you were to, compare, comparatively speaking, what is the inflow like to JCAP from, in terms of royalties for Jamaican music played or Jamaican from other territories internationally?
Mm-hmm. So we collect from other societies. So for example, a BMI, ASCAP, which is in the US, SACEM, France, APRA, Australia. So these are who we collect from, the respective countries.
Yes.
Right? So we, in fact, collect more international royalties than we collect local royalties in Jamaica. And I can just give an estimate. I can't give you the exact figure. So for example, and this is estimating, I would say we collect 40% local, 60% international. So we do collect more from international.
Very good. My final question is, in terms of the relationship between JAMS and JCAP, I am to some extent sensing a like a overlap, like an alignment of your functions. Is there?
There's no overlap. We do the same thing, but we represent different interests. So,
yes, go ahead.
We represent the primary rights holders, which are the creators, the persons who write the music. So without us, jams, should I say? Without us, there is no jams in a sense. So jams represent the secondary rights holders, which are the producers. They do the investment in the music creation. So JCAP represents the persons who actually write the lyrics on the paper and build the rhythm, play the instrument.
All right, so your payments, your royalties are restricted to songwriters only, that's what you're saying?
Songwriters, yes, and music composers and publishers.
The intellectual aspect.
Exactly, the IP aspect.
Do you think there's a potential then for both organizations to, albeit that there's a distinction in terms of, you know.
I have been warned. Mr. Mullings from JAMS would like to make a comment.
I'll give the floor to Eva.
Yes. But no, I mean, I was just going to highlight and just add a little to what Ms. Hewitt in terms of the distinction between the representations. So we represent, as was stated, the executive producers. So when we say producers, we're talking the executive producers. But we can break that down into just actual individuals who we call record producers, who could be the artist himself who's taking the risk and investing in production of music, or an actual bona fide record producer. So, you know, from the time of Studio One, Mr. Dodd, coming up to the King Jammies, to Steve McGregor, names you're familiar with. These are Stephen McGregor, the genius, DJ Frost, Chimney Records, etc. So these are persons that you may know. So these are record producers, but it may also translate into entities. So you may have a record label now that is the owner, the risk taker behind the production of the music. And might I say, without persons investing in the production, the song is just a poem. So the producers are in fact the kingmakers in the process, Ms. Hewitt.
Let me just have a clarification, then I'll come back to you, Donovan. What about neighboring rights?
All right, so the rights that we represent are typically classified as neighboring rights. So you have copyright, which relates to the rights of the songwriters and the composers. And then you have neighboring rights, which are the rights of the producers and performers. But let me hasten to say that it's just a term that is used for distinction purposes, because neighboring rights it still relates to copyright of the sound recording owner, copyright in relation to the rights of the performers. So these are the two groups that we represent. So it's still copyright that they own, but it's just called neighboring rights for distinction purposes to a large extent.
Go ahead.
I should have apologized and let me extend my...
I'm going to have to distinguish between the Williams here now, you know, and they're both D. Williams.
Central.
Go ahead.
Yes, I came in late, Madam Chair. Yeah, I came in late and I apologize. So I may have missed the initial presentation by Mr.
Mullings.
By Mr. Mullings from JAMS.
Right.
And so, pardon my ignorance, or if I asked a question that was already answered by you,
that's fine.
You know,
I was happy for the opportunity to.
Yeah.
Clarify.
So you also, on behalf of those persons who fall within your jurisdiction, for like the labelers, the executive producer, you also do collections on their behalf?
Yes, that's what we do. We collect for the record producers and the performers. Performers being the artists and the musicians.
Artists and...
Yes.
Okay, so the distinction is becoming a little clearer now.
Okay, so, all right, so we will now take a question from Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I remain concerned with issues of compliance and monitoring and enforcement. And perhaps it's the lawyer in me, I'm not sure. But it's important to consider what are aspirations and what can be actualized. I recall, Chair, you mentioned, I didn't catch all of what you said about Canada and whether what obtains there in terms of mandating broadcasters to play a certain percentage of music.
Yes, the last time I checked, it was 30%. I don't know if it still is 30%.
And what I'm curious
of Canadian
about,
content.
What I'm curious about is whether there is any kind of legislative framework that makes that more than just a policy. So you're mandating that this should happen, but how do you enforce that? Is there legislation behind that and the extent to which that is monitored?
Yeah. I will ask Mr. Mullings to take that one.
Okay, thank you, Minister. So internationally, it comes under the banner of content quota, is what it's called. And this obtains in a wide range of jurisdictions internationally, at least 24 by my count. So there's Canada, there's South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and quite a number of other territories where content quota exists. And in each territory, you'll have different ranges in terms of what is required by law as the minimum amount of local content that a broadcaster is to play. So each country will vary its ratio. So for instance, in Nigeria, it comes with legislation. It is underpinned by legislation. But it varies significantly across territories, the nature of the legislation. So in Nigeria, for instance, they stipulate that once it's a public broadcaster, then there's a minimum 70% local content that the public broadcaster is required to play. Whereas the private broadcaster, there's a lower threshold for the private broadcaster. So it will depend on the territory that you're in. The legislation will speak more specifically to the rate and the sort of dimensions that the quota system actually takes on.
I'm so sorry. Is there a framework in place in terms of the legislative framework or the legislation that addresses monitoring to ensure compliance?
Yes, there is. So for instance, in the US, there's what is called needle time regulations. And so that is something which now, US had a massive payola problem back in the day. And so they introduced needle time legislation and regulations. And so once you had that legislation in place, they were now able to now apply a system around that to monitor actual playing of music. They don't have content quota, within the American system based on whether it's local versus foreign, but they have a quota in relation to how many of a particular artist's song can be played consecutively within an hour, for instance. So there are monitoring frameworks that exist in different territories for different purposes, and there are also technologies that allows you to monitor. So Ms. Hewitt mentioned earlier, for instance, that there's technology that is available to monitor so that we can know how many songs were played within a given hour, whether they're local or international. That's technology, for instance, we've had since 2012. We were on Jams was among the first within the region, before JCAP, to adopt this technology. And so we're able to tell literally minutes after a song is played locally, we're able to tell the name of the song, name of the artist, the record label, the code behind it, generates a report. So this gives us a report that enables us to do distribution in a very accurate manner, but it also helps for that kind of purpose to see how many local were played by a particular station, how many international would have been played.
Thank you. And my final question, Chair, is whether it is your recommendation that we look at legislation locally in a similar vein.
I'll go first. JAMS's position may differ slightly from JCAP because in 2008, coming through to 2012, we had a very firm, a very clear position that we supported content quota very firmly. However, there has been such a major transition in terms of technology and major shifts in terms of the broadcast landscape that we have taken a more measured sort of position on it, because within the broadcasting landscape, especially now when the broadcasters are competing against online platforms. So radio is now competing with YouTube, for instance. They're competing with Spotify. And you can place your ad on RJR or IRA, etc., or you can place it online in a targeted way. So the reason I'm saying all of this, the broadcast media landscape is now highly competitive. They're operating on razor-thin margins. The revenue is migrating to a more large extent to online space. And so to now impose on top of that reality a mandate that you play a specific proportion of local content, you now are tying their hands in terms of the program flexibility that they may have to maintain their niche, to remain competitive. So we are not as hard-lined in terms of the content quota as we would have before. And to the extent that we still do support it, because it's necessary for cultural support of the music, it's necessary for the economic impact as well on the CMOs and the rights owners. But we would take a position where the rate that may be proposed would be significantly lower than what we might have proposed years ago. Years ago, we might have said 50% local. We're now closer to a ballpark of maybe 35 to 40% local, if it's to be mandated, any at all. Right now, it is in the range, just before Ms. Hewitt comes in, based on our measurements, it has transitioned from the high 20s in the maybe 2009-10, because we measured it, from the high 20s in terms of local share to somewhere around 33-34% now, because you have more local stations that are playing more Jamaican music. There's Sun City, which is heavy on local content. There's still IFM, which is heavy on that. There is Hits 92 FM. There is, I think I mentioned IRA, did I? Yes, IRFM. Yes, IRFM. There's also Gospel JA, which is a Jamaican, centric gospel station. And there are several other stations that are now adopting that format because, in my view, the success of IRFM in being a Jamaican music station, others have seen that and are trying to mirror that. And so you have seen that shift in the percentage of Jamaican music being sort of represented in that 100% share. So it has grown over time.
We are definitely for the quota. The reason being is that our local members, 4,000 persons, we may not necessarily have, say, the top 30 high-profile members locally. So our members are merely what would you say now? Not the most popular Jamaican musicians. So they rely heavily on their music being played on our terrestrial radio stations, right? So they might not have the access to say, okay, I might get my song on an international radio that might be online. They might not have the access to do that. So they are mainly getting access to our local radio station. So we would want for more of our local radio station to play more local music. And that is because it will represent our members more than the majority of popular entertainers who might go with the BMI, who might go with the ASCAP, and not necessarily stay with their local JCAP organization.
Chair, I just have one.
Okay,
just one
Member
final
Hamilton.
earlier had requested some feedback in relation to the statutory mechanical rates. So in the US, for example, they have statutory rates set at 9.1 cents, and so for artists. How would that benefit us locally for us to stipulate minimum statutory mechanical rates for our people? I know, for example, you have artists that sign agreements, distribution agreements locally, but there is no standard as it relates to how they can earn. I just want to get your feedback on that and whether or not it's something that we should institute.
I think we should. It wouldn't hurt. But what we have realized and what we have found is that so creators or local artists, a lot of them are signed to publishing companies. Now, the publishing companies are the ones who have first dib in authorizing the mechanical aspect for these creators. So it would not necessarily be on JCAP to negotiate for these mechanicals because these artists are assigned to publishing, and the publishing are the ones who usually represent those creators directly.
I can appreciate that, but then I'm looking at it from a broader sense. Yes, they are signed to these publishers, but how do we guarantee that they get a certain amount of money from these agreements? Because I've seen contracts where people, I cry for some of these local creators, but then there's no standard. There's no minimum standard to say, as a publisher, I must collect at least this amount or pay this amount. So, yeah.
Go ahead and complete your comments, right, and then I'll ask Mr. Mullings to
respond to it.
Assist with the yes, clarification.
Okay. I mean, I think I'm pretty much clear as to what it is I'm trying to ask.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mullings?
Okay, thank you, Minister. So in terms of the mechanical licensing and the statutory rates that you referenced, so yes, in the US, they have statutory rates. In Jamaica, would it benefit us to have statutory rates for mechanical licensing? The first thing you look at is what is mechanical royalties? What are mechanical royalties? These are royalties that derive from every use of the work, whether it's let's say a vinyl that was printed, a CD that is duplicated, and so forth. So every copy that is made, a percentage comes off as in the form of mechanical royalties, right? And goes to the songwriters and composers. That's the mechanical royalties. And that share comes off of the record producer share, right? Now, in the Jamaican context, to what extent is that viable and does it make sense? There is barely right now any manufacturing or production or reproduction of music in Jamaica for there to be, where there's an actual market of persons buying records, or Dynamic Sounds has closed, Sonic Sounds has closed, etc. Sorry? Digital downloads, but the mechanicals for those are being handled, however, internationally. So for instance, if you stream on Spotify, there's a mechanical share. If you go to Amazon or if you download somewhere, there's a mechanical share. So in the US market, when it happens in the US market, that share goes over to what is called the MLC in the US. If it's in the UK, it goes to MCPS and so forth. So each of these territories where the duplication is taking place, there's a body within that territory that's collecting it. And so it's up to now the songwriters, composers, and their publishers to claim in these different territories. Would there be any viable portion to claim in Jamaica? For me, the market is very thin, But I would still support it because, in fact, I've sent the proposal to JIPO for it to be brought into the new set of provisions for the amendment to the Copyright Act. They did, however, respond that they don't think at this time it's something to be incorporated. But I'm still going to push. So it would make sense to still have it, but the market is extremely thin, you know. But not sure. But mechanical royalties exist for Jamaican songwriters and composers and their publishers internationally. It's for them to go out there and claim it because the monies are sitting there in these agencies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams, Mr. Donovan Williams, or is it Mr. Delroy Williams?
No, I'm just being very quick. I just wanted to just say to...
I'm sorry, I'm recognizing Member Delroy Williams.
Yes, I just wanted to say to Ms. Hewitt, in the conversation between Mr. Evan and Ms. Hewitt, I just want to say that, you know, I hope there's an appreciation as a member, as a legislator, there's an appreciation for what Mr. Evans was saying with respect to content quota. I mean, we do understand the point you are making, but as a legislator, I would have to, all these considerations, you know, we'd have to flesh them out in order to make a decision like that, based on the current climate, the current environment that our broadcasters are operating in. So I just want to underscore that point, but also to mention that you look at that against also the risk to the culture, to the risk to our music. And so when you're making a decision like that, you know, you have to look at what Mr. Evans is saying in terms of the current climate, and if there would be issues, you know, in terms of demand and supply. You know, what is the broadcasters are playing songs because the demand for them exists. You know, and if we would impact that kind of a market situation in our legislation, so we have to be very careful in terms of what we do as legislators.
Thank you, Member Williams. Member Donovan Williams.
I'm not too far off from, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm not too far off from Member Williams in terms of, because what I was going to say, certain considerations arise in my head, and probably it would require some research as to whether there is any, you know, charter rights infringement or potentially charter rights infringement.
Right. And look at, good, thank you. And Senator Bernard did not get a chance to ask a question or say anything. So I will certainly invite him to make a comment at this time. Thank you, Senator Bernard.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to say that Senator Gill would have captured my question in his second question of the three-part question presented to Sir Evan. So I'm comfortable. But I just want... We will talk. I just want to say my...
What do I say? Lecture and information on the music industry and what royalties mean and how it works. And I really want to thank stakeholders. Next meeting, we will have other interesting presentations. And I just want to thank the members, the staff from my ministry. I did not acknowledge Mr. Philip Clark, who came in while we were in the middle of the discussions. And just to thank all of you for making yourselves available. I want to invite Member Nikisha Burchell, who stayed online. I just want to invite her. Member, do you have a question or would you like to make a comment? And if you could turn your camera on, please.
Thank you. I'm out in the field in South St. James, and so my background is a little unconventional now for this meeting, but I want to say that I learned quite a bit from the presentations from both JCAP and the other presenter, and the questions really did unearth a lot of the background in terms of their operations. I'm hoping that by the next sitting we'll be able to see how we can figure in some of the proposals they placed on the table now that we understand how they operate. I'm looking forward to the other presentations next week.
Thank you so much. And so at this point, I would ask if there's any other business. No other business? Pardon? The date? Well, we said at 2-week intervals. So I will ask the clerk. We're looking at Wednesday, March 18. Same time. All right? So is that fine with everyone? Right? And remember now, we want to really move quickly on this green paper so we can have the white paper ready before the end of this fiscal year. So I want to thank you so much. There's no other business. I will ask that someone so move. All right, so moved by Mr. Donovan Williams, seconded by Ms. Tova Hamilton. Thank you so much. The meeting is now adjourned. Excellent meeting. Thank you. This will probably be the most exciting Joint Select Committee. Huh?